Before the 18th century, Halkyn Mountain and the surrounding area was just made up of small farming communities and isolated hamlets. However, the expansion of lead mining and quarrying in the 18th and 19th centuries dramatically changed the area. The villages such as Rhys-y-Cai, Rhos-Esmor, Moel y Crio and Halkyn grew as the miners from Derbyshire and elsewhere moved into the area, hoping to find better fortune and seeking opportunities that the rich lead veins had to offer. Now, in the 21st century, children play happily in the park at Halkyn, and yet, below the ground underneath them are miles of tunnels and caverns. The legacy of centuries of lead mining not visible to those on the surface. In 1987, the Halkyn mines fully closed, signalling the end of lead mining in Wales. Since then, people have been enjoying the grassy common of Halkyn Mountain, walking, riding and playing together. Perhaps they might pause to replenish their energy by enjoying a picnic together, surrounded by a stunning landscape with breathtaking views over the Dee estuary. In the 19th century, however, miners would be refueling their bodies for very different reasons. For a young boy working at the surface, the break would be from a long day of pounding rocks, washing lead ore, or working the jig rather than playing outside in the fresh air with his brothers and sisters. Boys worked in lead mining from quite a young age. They were employed in many of the same surface tasks as women and girls, but many soon found themselves working below ground, operating winding machines or ventilation doors. Once working for a mine company, the lead miner would purchase his own tallow candles from the company's store. Most of the work was carried out using picks, crowbars, hammers, wedges and shovels. At the hauling shafts, the larger buckets, or kibbles, would be raised to the surface using a simple hand-operated windlass. At deeper shafts, a horse whim might be erected consisting of a large winding drum rotated by horsepower. The men worked hard for their wages, but it came at a cost to their health. Poor ventilation was common in many local mines and created dreadful working conditions. Working in bad air was simply accepted as an occupational hazard in the lead mines. In 1850, one of the most bitter disputes between the miners and the mine companies was over attempts to change the long-standing 6-hour day to one of 8 hours. The men were well aware of the problems of lead poisoning and chest disease, and considered 6 hours to be more than enough. The strike lasted 12 months, during which time many miners suffered badly. In 1862, the government sent inspectors from the Kinnaird Commission to investigate the health and working conditions of the men and boys employed in the lead mines, and to make recommendations on the health and safety of mines that were not covered by the existing legislation. Most of those interviewed stated that they were well treated and the conditions were good. They also stated that children were not sent to work underground until the age of about 15. It seems, however, that at the inquiry, they may not have been entirely free to express their opinions openly. Details available elsewhere give the impression that many boys worked underground from the age of 9 or 10, and the condition of some miners' houses were worse than stated. Richard Hughes of Millward Lead Mine was 10 years old when he was interviewed. He explained that the work made him tired, but he was never beaten. Richard was also proud to inform the inspectors that he attended chapel regularly. Many of the families attended church or chapel up to 3 or 4 times a day on Sundays. Attendance and religious worship was often attributed to improvements in the living conditions of the miners and the workers. However, 10-year-old John Evans had to make do with saying his prayers at home, as his mother was ashamed of his clothes. The Reverend Owen Owens, originally a schoolmaster from Dolgellau, was ordained as the minister of Rhys-y-Cai Chapel in 1821. For many boys and young men who were already working in the mines, Sunday school was the only place for them to learn to read and write. Many mining families living on the mountain were indeed very poor. Some of the miners who could afford it would take wasteland and build their own homes, which gave them an independence that was much prized. The fortunes of the community were tied to the prosperity of the mines, and so when lead prices slumped or mines flooded, there was great hardship. Most families supplemented their mining income by growing vegetables and keeping pigs and chickens. This was sometimes the difference between starvation and survival during a hard winter. In spite of these hardships, the miners were often renowned for their resolutely optimistic outlook on life. In 1842, Halkyn miners' homes were described as neat, though scantily furnished, and most had at least a rag rug to soften the hearth. In the years that followed, clocks were to be owned by most mining families. Metal cutlery then became the next functional addition, followed by china and the occasional ornament. Saturday evenings would see the whole family taking their turn in a tin bath by the fire. The children would follow the adults until eventually everyone was clean and tidy. Clothes would be washed and pressed, ready for attending church or chapel the next day. The church in Halkyn was built in 1846 and still displays the notice that explains that all worshippers were welcome to sit in any pews they wished. The church was built by local subscription and is limited in size compared to the grander St. Mary's Church of Halkyn. It was very much a miners' church where the community would come together for regular worship as well as celebrating weddings and mourning those that had passed away. Infant baptisms would also be common at this time. With high infant mortality rates, it was never assumed that a child would reach maturity, and so they would often be baptised as soon as possible after birth. In comparison, St. Mary's Church in Halkyn is the largest of the Halkyn mountain churches. Made of local sandstone, it was given as a gift to the parish by Hugh Lupus Grosvenor, the 1st Duke of Westminster, in 1878. The Grosvenor family first began to acquire the mineral rights to the mines of Halkyn Mountain from 1601, and by 1634 it had gained sole rights. They issued leases to groups of miners and mining companies, and given the rich natural resources that lay below the ground, the family became very wealthy over the following centuries. Many of the Grosvenors were philanthropic landlords, particularly the 1st Duke of Westminster, who also ploughed money back into the housing for villagers and paid for the village churches and schools, including Lord Westminster's charity school in Halkyn and Halkyn School. The bells of St. Mary's have been heard throughout the community for over 130 years now, and sadly have often marked the passing of another member of the mining community. If you were a lead miner at Halkyn Mountain before 1900, you were likely to have died 15 or 20 years earlier than the average non-miner. This was due to a combination of silicosis and lead poisoning. It is commonly known that old miners were characterised by their bad lungs and shortness of breath. As well as lung problems, many men also suffered from lead poisoning, which was known by miners as belan. Symptoms included constipation, vomiting, weight loss, muscle weakness, headaches, and blue gum, which was a distinctive thin black line over the gums. Nowadays, local people value the natural beauty of the open mountain more than ever, and are fiercely proud of their rich cultural heritage. Next time you're out walking or riding on the common, take time to reflect on those who have trod these paths before you, walking to work in the mines, thus creating the network of footpaths that still crisscross Halkyn Mountain today. Take time to enjoy the silence, now that the landscape rests.